Hello guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're gonna look at the treatment of repayment of government grants, as I received from some of you the request on the treatment and how we should record that, how we should approach this kind of questions, as in the books there are not appropriate example to base our exam techniques. So let's start. First of all, we should mention that government grants are ruled under the IAS 20 standard, and we know that grants are the resources provided by the government for the entities for different kind of purposes. And please also note that if any of the funds, funds are provided for free of charge, then this kind of treatment is not governed under the IAS 20. So basically the support from the government should be accompanied by some kind of requirement, or there should be preconditions, or there should be some kind of test that the beneficial entity should obey and met the criteria till the implementation of that criteria mentioned in the contract or in the agreement. So as we know, government grants are provided for either for capital expenditures or revenue expenditures. As we know, capital expenditures are those that either improve useful life of the asset or improve income generating potential. Okay, these two kind of expenditure, if they are expenditure meets the criteria of these two, either of these two, then we can consider this as the capital expenditure. And for the treatment of capital expenditure is either deducting it from the value of non-current asset for which we have received, which is, let's say we have received $10,000 for buying a specific kind of asset, then we should record this as debit cash 10,000 and credit non-current asset 10,000. Okay, this is our treatment. Or we can treat this amounts received as deferred income. Debit cash, for example, 10,000, and credit deferred income, which is the requirement of accruals conceptual framework. Because conceptual framework says that the income should be recorded when the actual expenditure is incurred. So if we are receiving $10,000 for a specific kind of asset, then we should record this gain, this amount received, in our statement of profit or loss, statement of comprehensive income over the useful life of the asset. So if, for example, we have received $10,000 for the asset which has 5 years useful life, then we should recognize $2,000 of income over the 5 years. So by doing this, we will be able to meet the criteria to obey the accruals concept. Okay, this is the rationale behind the capital expenditures for being treated as deferred income. And the second point is for government grants are the funds received for revenue expenditures. Okay, and in this type of funds received, we are either credit this to statement of profit or loss. Let me write this: either credit to statement of profit or loss as a separate line of item, or deduct the amount received deduct the amount received from the expenses. Okay, for example, let's assume that we have incurred, for example, $10,000 of expense, and government says that I will grant you $2,000 of funds. So we can either say that, for example, debit cash 2,000, credit gain 2,000, or we can treat it like debit cash 2,000 and credit, for example, let's assume that this is our admin expense. We can say debit admin expense 2,000. Basically, these two types of treatments are similarly the same, are quite same, but the general, I think that you are now able to catch the idea of how to correctly treat them once we receive the grant from the government for specific purposes. And let's look at the treatment of repayment of the government grants. Okay, let's assume that first we should start. Let's start with revenue expenditure on which we have received government grant. Okay, so let's assume that a company has received $20,000 of fund from the government. If, for example, if it maintains specific level of, for example, production, let's say it's the agricultural one, for example, I'm just writing it for example purposes, production consequently 4 years. Okay, let's assume that we have received this amount. How we should record them? We will write debit cash 20,000 and for example credit, for example, deferred income 20,000. So basically this $20,000 is given to us in order to meet the criteria of this, to continuously being able to meet specific level of production for 4 years. So if in either of these years we are unable to meet the criteria, then this amount that we have received, initial amount, the original amount, will be repaid to the government. Okay, so these 20,000 should be split between 4 years. Let's assume that in the first year, how we should write this? We will say debit cash. 20,000 we have already write this. Let's say at the year end, end of the first year, we will record this as debit cash, debit deferred income, $5,000, and credit gain $5,000. Why? Because 20,000 is to be divided into 4 parts. 5,000 the first year, 5,000 the second year, 5,000 the third year, and 5,000 in 4 years. So basically in the 4 years cumulative amount of gain that will be recognized is 20,000. So in each year we will record 5,000 as our gain, and let's assume that at the end of the second year, we have also recognized debit deferred income $5,000 and credit gain $5,000. So basically what have left in our account is credit balance of deferred income of $10,000. And let's assume that we have breached the conditions. And no longer will be able to meet the criteria, and grant becomes repayable. What happens here? First, how much of the balance have left? This is 10,000. And how much we have originally received? 10,000. So we should record liability of original amount. We have get rid of the amount in our statement of profit or loss already recognized, debit deferred income, 10,000. Okay, and the balancing figure is loss of $10,000. Okay, this will be our treatment. So what we should do first, we should recognize liability, okay, of original amount received. Second, we should get rid of the amount that have left, get rid of the balance that had left in our statement of profit or loss, and the balancing figure will be the amount that will go to statement of profit or loss. Okay, this will be our treatment for the revenue expenditure. And let's look at the let's look at the example where we are deducting this amount from carrying amount of the current asset, of the cost of the current asset. And let me correct this entry here as repayment of government grants, repayment of government grants, recorded as deferred income. Okay, so as typing as the revenue is not correct, treatment is not correct heading. So let's look what would be our treatment if received for if we have received a government grant and recorded this and reflected it in our statement as credit to non-current asset, credit to the cost of the non-current asset. So let's assume that a company received $20,000 for the asset that cost $120,000. Okay, and this asset has 5 years useful life. Okay, so basically what we are doing here, if we are crediting this to the non-current asset, we are recording debit cash $20,000. Okay, and we are crediting this amount to the carrying amount of the non-current asset, debit $20,000 as to the non-current asset. So basically we are once again have to abide by the accruals concept. Okay, so if we had not purchased this asset, okay, this asset that has cost $120,000 and has 5 years useful life, we would not be able to receive this amount, $20,000. Okay, so basically this amount that we have received, 20,000, should be recorded in our statement of profit or loss over the period on which we will benefit from the use of the asset. So as in our prior example, this amount will be split as 5,000 the first year, 5,000 the second year, 5,000 the third year, and 5,000 the fourth year. Okay, so the general amount will be 20,000, of course, as the original amount, but we should instead of recognizing 20,000 gain in the first year, we should record this over the useful life of the asset. So how we should treat the repayment of the government grant is if we have deducted this from the cost of the non-current asset. So in order to calculate this, we should create two different kinds of columns. In first example, we would record our treatment of the depreciation and accumulated depreciation on the non-current asset for which we have received the government grant, and we'll type the figures as if we have never received the government grant. So without the government grant, how our asset and depreciation would be calculated, and how it is already calculated with consideration given to the amount received by the government. So in the first example, we know that the cost of the asset cost is $120,000. Okay, it has the useful life of 5 years. So basically the annual depreciation is $24,000. Okay, let's assume that at the end of the third year, we have 24 multiplied by 3. This will give us $22,000. This amount of accumulated depreciation. Okay, and basically our carrying value is $48,000. So if we have not received the government grant, we should have 24,000 depreciation, annually $22,000 of accumulated depreciation, and 48,000 of carrying amount of the fixed asset. But let's look at the treatment of the asset as if we have received the government grant. So here we should treat the cost as $100. Sorry, let me correct this. We will treat this as $100, okay, because we have deducted 20,000 received from the cost of the asset. Okay, so the others related information is the same. Useful life is again 5 years, but here we will have the depreciation of how much? $20,000 annually. Okay, and at the third year end we should have $60,000 of accumulated depreciation, and our non-current assets carrying amount should have been $40,000. Okay, so with government grant we have 40,000. Without government grant we would have $48,000. So if the amount becomes repayable, what are we doing? First, let me type this as the reversal entries. Okay, reversal entries for repayment of repayment. So here we will type as the debit non-current assets $20,000 and credit depreciation expense. Let me look once again. Yes, we are debiting $20,000 for this. Then we are crediting the depreciation expense, because what we are doing here is that in order to account for the asset as if we have never received a government grant, we should increase the we should increase the depreciation calculated over the 3 years, accumulated depreciation that are accumulated over the 3 years, from 60,000 to 72,000. Okay, so in order to do this, what we should do? We should recognize 12,000 of depreciation expense in this year. Okay, in order to increase our accumulated depreciation 12,000. Okay, and finally we should recognize the liability of $20,000 because we have received the 20,000, this amount, and we are no longer available to meet the criteria to receive those funds. So these are the two different types of treatment of government grants and are their repayments. Hope that this has helped you in your study. Please put your comments below on what kind of topics you would like to have the general idea of, and what kind of questions you are facing the difficulties in order to overcome your problems. Feel free to contact me, and hope that this video have helped you over your course of study. See you, bye.